Right, good evening, members. Thanks for coming along on this cold night. First of many, I'm sure, for December, before we get overheated due to COP23. First thing we've got on here is apologies for absence. And I've got Leon Young, my vice chair, got a meeting before this special meeting of Overview and Scrutiny was booked. Claire Brooker, who may be here anyway, but and Brian Yates. Sorry, Sue, Councillor Woodward. Oh, right. So it is okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So I send apologies. I've got that here, but thank you. There's a special overview and scrutiny committee, and I say the data was only recently agreed, but it does give us an opportunity to make our views known and ask questions ready for the cabinet meeting next week and making a decision on the cinema for Lichfield district. And this is an update. The next item is declarations of interest. I'll explain a bit more as we go along. Anybody got a declaration of interest? No. And the next one then is the minutes of the previous meeting, which have been circulated. There's just one slight amendment, although it's important if you live in the area. There's reference to Chase Terrace on the last page, but one, which is on page 6. Members' questions, the figures in Appendix C, including blah, 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 around a fence around Chase Terrace Memorial Bowling Green. And it's, of course, for those who know, Chasetown Memorial Bowling Green. So with that slight amendment there or correction, people to move those? Yes? Sorry.
Thanks, Chair. Just for the record, I sent my apologies in on the 6th of November as well, owing to my wife's due date being around the same time as this meeting. Consequently, my daughter was born on the 13th of November.
Yeah,
which is what I missed it. If we could have those added in the apologies,
certainly. I'm pretty sure I mentioned them at the time, but then again, I get a draft of these minutes. I'm not going to blame officers. I get a draft of the minutes, and I didn't notice that, but certainly you did. Councillor Ho, you did give your apologies, and I understand it was good news anyway in the end. So that's all right. So thank you for that. So they agreed then with those corrections. Thank you. Oh,
yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just a correction that I couldn't have been present and absent at the same time.
Oh, no. You didn't leave early. So which one is it? Were you here or weren't you? I thought you were. Yeah, okay, right. Sorry about that. Councillor Whitehouse. Oh, doing well tonight. Thank you for those humiliations. I'll read the draft minutes properly next time, William. Right, that's that one then. Thank you very much. Now, item 4 would be exclusion of press, except we're able to look at this report in public insofar as we can. There is a confidential appendix where perhaps most of the questions might be later on. I'm relying on myself and on William and on Anthony in case somebody strays into a section that shouldn't be in public. The report is doing its best it can in public, but of course there are commercial interests which protects this council and therefore our council taxpayers. So therefore there are questions that do need to be addressed in the confidential section. But hopefully members can actually see and the public can see some progress being made on this. So that's I'm going to rely on members to be careful on what questions they ask, but I'll stop there if I need to. I'll go through it section by section, and that's when I want questions. I go section by section rather than just give me a question that appears at the end. The first question I can ask everybody: do we want a cinema in Lichfield? If we don't want a cinema, then you might be critical of the report. But if we want a cinema, then is this the best way of going about it? Why can't I leave it to the commercial world? So put those fundamental questions in there, which I know have been addressed to some degree in the past, but that's on the basis of it. 3 things. There's reference to Evolve Estates. There's reference to London and Cambridge properties. There's reference to Ruckman properties, and there's of course McCaw. And McCaw is the parent company of all of those, I think. Just the Ruckman properties I've only seen recently, which is also based at London and Cambridge properties. I don't know whether Anthony or somebody else can actually tell us what those different aspects are, just to start us off with the those questions. if that's okay, Anthony. Well, I'll decide who does it. Anthony, can you do it for me?
The only reason I'm coming in on the chair is that we did cover this a little bit in the previous report that came before the committee in June, and I'm trying to remember whether that was in the private part of the agenda.
Did it include Rookman though? Or not? I just wonder who they were. Actually.
Yeah,
I mean,
well-
this is all public information. This,
Yeah, so we asked PwC to do a review of the various companies involved
Yeah.
in this, which is why it was in. So they're all part of a group of companies. At the very top is a company called Sheetanger Properties Limited, and then you work down through Rookman and Evolve in that structure.
okay.
They're all limited. Sorry, they're all linked by ownership and funding paths. So they've all got various roles in the development. Let's say one part provides funding, another one owns the asset, and the third part is the asset manager or the development partner.
Thank you. That's all I wanted, really. In the executive summary, if you look at 1.3, the paper proposes and recommends the introduction of a new clause requested by Evolve Estates to commit the council to buy out their shareholding in the LLP 2 years after completion of the development. There's a bit more on it in the report in the public, but then obviously there's some more issues raised in the private section, so I might come back to that later on. The recommendation we're being asked to look at, this is the report to Cabinet because we're so close to the Cabinet, but we're still asked to comment on these. 2.1 there, about the buyout clause there, and then just draw attention to the yet to be decided bit about the valuer. That's in there, I think, recommends the council to say. Yeah, the clause is subject to the confirmation from the council's legal team and independent valuer. So we'll come on to that again later on, but that's in there. Just a minute. And then 2.2 is the cabinet delegate authority, which was being asked to agree or comment on there. And 2.3 there with the £3.999 million reference. And then 2.4 with it coming back to overview and scrutiny. I'll take Colin now then for that section, then Sue.
Yes, Chair, I've got two questions on this section.
Thank you.
The first is a point of detail really for information. You mentioned an independent valuer, and I'd just like a bit of clarification about who that is, whether that's a district valuer or whether it's an outside professional valuer. And the second question is 2.4, that we haven't got a business plan yet. And I just wonder whether it's wise to crack on that without seeing a business plan, making really important decisions. I mean, on the record, I think we must have a cinema in Lichfield. I really support it, but I think we've got to do it carefully and make sure that it works and it's not going to put us in financial jeopardy. So those are my two questions. Why no business plan yet? And is it wise to proceed without one? And who's the independent valuer?
Before I ask somebody to respond to that, I would say if Simon wants to come in at any time, if you actually say Simon verbally, then I'll make sure that you're involved. But Anthony or whoever, thank you. Thank you.
On the valuer, it isn't the district valuer. It's a company called Aspinall Verdi, who are specialists in regeneration, economic development, areas of work. They're not only valuers, but they look at the more holistic aspects of regeneration in terms of economic benefits, wider city centre regeneration, place shaping, that type of thing. So they're more expert. They've got more expertise in the type of valuations we're looking at here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the business plan was the next one.
If I could take that, Steve. Yeah,
Thank you.
I actually agree with the question completely, Colin. I asked the exact same. I think everyone agrees. It's just we haven't had the time to formulate that business plan yet. That's why I asked for this to go back to Cabinet and ONS when we do have that. However, Anthony has got some numbers of projected income, and he's also gone through and put projected costs in there in terms of that. So there's a sort of a draft business plan in there. I don't know if I'm putting any more meat on the bones on that until we have to do it in confidential. I don't know.
Yes, so there is some uncertainty around the numbers. I'm going to be honest with you on that. We've done scenarios to try and project the numbers. based on the information we've been provided. However, the reason, and we've done this consistently through the reports that have come through, is we've taken a budget neutral approach. So we're not building any income into the budget at this stage, which means that we, in the event that the numbers we project are wrong, they're too optimistic, whatever, we haven't got a budget shortfall. So that's the approach I'm recommending that the council continues to take until we've got full visibility on not only the numbers, but some of the risks that are potentially there with owning a building, with tenants in it, etc.
Okay, thank you. Sue. Oh, yes, thanks. Thank you, Simon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to add to what Councillor Smith has said as well. So there are two distinct elements to this proposal. Firstly, the development of a cinema complex and the associated units alongside it, and then the second is the trading of that activity. We are clearly focused on both at the moment, but our primary focus is the cost of development alongside building the business case. So to Councillor Ball's question, clearly before the company starts trading effectively, there will be a business plan that would need to be approved by the board. But at the moment, let's say we're thinking about the development of the scheme before we start to trade it, if that makes sense to people.
Yeah, does okay, Colin? Or okay, thank you, Simon.
But can I just have one small thing to that as well? And this might be really obvious, but just to be really clear on it. Obviously, that business plan won't cover the operation of cinema. To be really clear, no. We're not doing that as a council. We're operating as a landlord in this environment. Yeah.
Thank you. And Sue was next on my list.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'd just like to ask about the figures, because it's been mooted publicly that this is about £3.5 million anticipated spend, but in paragraph 2.31, it says there that it's 3.999 million, pretty much 4 million. I just wonder if someone can explain where the extra £499,000 comes from. Can I also comment on the question that Councillor Ball asked? Because the fact that there's no business plan as yet that we're able to see, that's slightly worrying. Even more worrying is the fact that the finance officer has said there is still some uncertainty about the numbers, and I've written uncertainty in my notes several times later in the report. But if there is some draft business plan, when is that draft? When is it possible to see that draft business plan, please?
Okay. Can anybody help with that? So
I can provide some answers on the number question. So the number that's been quoted publicly, the 3.5 million, is a number that Evolve Estates have put forward as the potential cost of the buyout. There's two aspects to the buyout calculation. There is a profit element to Evolve, which is quoted as a figure which is fixed. The second figure is is related to the cost of the development, and they've quoted a figure for that. Now, that is a movable number because it depends on what the development out turns at. What we've done is, and because my responsibility is to the council to check the robustness of the numbers, is we've had a look at those numbers in the context of the budget that we've set and has been reviewed by an independent quantity surveyor and PricewaterhouseCoopers. Our budget is a higher figure, so that accounts for roughly £200,000 of the additional budget. The second element is that in conversations with PricewaterhouseCoopers, there is a potential that the council will have to pay some stamp duty land tax in relation to the asset that's being acquired. There is a calculation in the document around that could be around £300,000. Now, there is potential that the stamp duty land tax could be mitigated or reduced or not payable, depending on how the asset is transferred into the limited liability partnership, and that's something we've got to work with PwC on. It would be remiss of me, though, not to put forward a budget that takes account of that risk, and that's why the number that we've included in the central scenario is higher than the one that has been quoted in public releases of information.
And the other question, I don't know if you can help with that, which is the draft business plan. When might we see one?
Yeah,
Yes, thank you.
I can do that, Chair. So
Thank you.
clearly, we work very closely with Evolve Estates to develop an understanding of the cost of the development. So that's the first phase, as well as the projected income from the first 3 to 5 years of trading. I will circulate that after this meeting, if that's okay, Chair, because
Okay.
there's no reason why any of the committee shouldn't be able to see that.
Great, thank you. So, do you want to come back on that? Sorry.
Can I just come back on one piece of clarification then? So we're the proposal to cabinet next week is to increase the budget by £3.999 million, and that is in addition to the figure at the bottom of page 10, which was the capital program budget of 5.788 million. So it's the sum of those two figures that's going to be expended on the cinema.
Yes, I understand from.
That's correct, yeah.
I could say yeah, but I mean, I saw Anthony nodding.
So
too,
9.788 million.
9.788.
Thank you.
Can I just say, I'd like to go through the whole report, the three background and so on. So I realised I made a rod from my own back by actually drawing attention to the recommendation, but that was only to concentrate minds. Is it okay if I go through the report now, the background on that, and we'll come back to that? Because the question you probably got are in there. Tell me if you're not, Miles, and then Dave.
I couldn't see mine later on.
You can, you can't.
I can't see it.
Okay, right then. In that
It
case,
relates to 2.1 reference to the legal team. I just wondered, obviously we're getting legal advice and it said this clause is subject to legal advice. I just wondered what the timeline is and when you expect that legal advice and how that fits into the decision making.
and Councillor Smith.
Yeah, can I? I'll get that, and then maybe Simon will follow up as well. Yeah, so that's obviously that legal advice was extremely important because that tells us whether we think this is a sound deal or not, and it's an independent advisor on that. We've had a draft version of that come in, but I believe that Simon's still discussing that with Aspinall Verde about the output of that, aren't you, Simon?
Yeah, that's correct, Chair. So we've been taking legal advice throughout the process.
Yes.
So since the very beginning of this project, we're working with Trowers and Hamlins, who are very well-known local government lawyers, as well as Councillor Smith says, Aspinall Verde, who are the professional valuers. So it's not that we're waiting for that; it's being developed as we go along. I had a number of meetings with them today. Anthony and I joined them in a meeting as well. At the moment, the outstanding parts are mine and Anthony's ability to be able to say to everybody in this committee and full council that what is being proposed offers best value and that there are no subsidy control concerns. So that's the last outstanding piece of information and advice that we're waiting for from them. I'm expecting that by the middle of next week at the latest to close it out, so that when we go to full council, if we go to full council, you'll have all the information to make the appropriate decision at that point.
Okay.
I just also add, sorry, Chair, that the cabinet decision will be fully dependent upon the output of that advice completely.
Okay.
So if that advice is really, really bad news and they recommend strongly against it for the council, then we don't follow through on it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. It's okay. Is this Dave, you're next. Is this something that can be asked later on, or?
So various points later on, but just in relation to what Councillor Smith has come through there. Just to check, you're talking about the cabinet meeting that's in 5 days. We're expecting that legal advice to be here before then, even though 2 of those days are a weekend.
No, I didn't say that.
Okay, so we're expecting this to go to cabinet in January.
Dependent on that advice. That'll be stated in the cabinet decision.
Okay, so just to confirm, this could well be going to cabinet next year as opposed to cabinet in December, depending on when that legal advice arrives.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for waiting for the other question. Thank you, Dave. And Paul Ray, Councillor Paul Ray.
Yes, just a following point for Anthony, for me. With the original budget was 5.87. Could you just tell us when the proposal originally came through? It was a lower amount, and obviously over the last couple of years, inflationary costs of construction have increased. Can you just reassure us that those have been factored into the budget? What was that original budget? So we're at 5.7 now. What was it originally when the proposal first came? Some reassurance that those increase in development costs have been factored into that revised budget.
So when we brought the
Sorry, no, it's on there. David's done that.
The original proposal, October 22, went to cabinet. We were talking about a budget of 5.35 million back then. It's obviously increased. We've had a couple of reviews, independent reviews of this. So the first review we had done was by a quantity surveyor, an independent quantity surveyor, that looked at the costings that Evolve had put forward and made some suggestions around increasing the budget to take account of some of the risks. The second piece of independent scrutiny we had was from PricewaterhouseCoopers on the budget in entirety. And their recommendation was that we further increase the contingency budget to cover cost inflation. Now, within that budget of 5.788 million, there's 883,000 of client contingency. So this sits with the council, which is about 18%. In addition, within the development budget, there's another 120,000 of development contingency. So you are, across both contingencies, you're talking close to £1 million there. But as I say, they're both based on independent advice. So they feel robust to me as the council's chief financial officer.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'll move on there for Maiden to do these other sections. Then obviously come back to the recommendations that go into cabinet. The background 3 there, which is already agreed. I think there's some questions up to a degree anyway. And then I've gotten 3.4 there, that towards the end of the summer, as negotiations were concluding, the council was approached by Evolve Estates about 1 amended and 2 new clauses they sought to include in the agreement. And that's the references there, but they are explained, I think, later on. On the 3.7, that's the probably the crucial question for most of us, and the information, some of that information is in confidential. That's in paragraphs 3.11 to 3.14 in the confidential appendices. So we'll come to that appendix, and I'll come to that later. Just draw attention to 3.10, which is the reference to the determination to deliver the cinema complex at the heart of their 3 Spires estate. That's what Evolve Estates are saying there. Over the page on 3.15, again, it's about a minimum of 2 years at that point. I've got it's now, it's a maximum of 2 years as well, if you like. And then on 3.16, the last sentence, they've obviously is simply requesting a firmer commitment from the council now that it will buy out their shareholding at that point. And I suppose the question I've got is, why wouldn't we? Why do we need that? I mean, we trust each other, don't we? That'll be written in here for these business reasons. Don't have to answer it if you think.
No, I can give you an answer from my perspective. I think the current economic climate with local authorities has perhaps framed some of this around, are local authorities in a position to buy in 2 years' time? That has probably framed some of the Evolve Estates concern in this area, let's just say.
You've sort of gone into politics, Anthony. That was a very good answer there. Or in diplomacy, anyway. I think Councillor Roberts, David Robertson had his hand up there. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I've got a note for this paragraph because it's a very different view of what we were originally told the agreement was. We were originally told the agreement could potentially be lasting up to 20 years. And we were shown at that point a business plan with various models of payback time. And originally there was going to be a differential payback. So one side was going to be getting paid back faster than the other. And then that was changed to 50%. And it just seems that when all of the presentations that I've seen on this, and I think I'm beyond my first hand on the number of presentations we've had on this. It's never been described to me previously as we will definitely be buying this after a certain period of time. It's always been presented to us as there will be the opportunity for the council to do so. So I'm not sure that it's a firmer commitment. I think it's now asking for a commitment that it will. because at no point was it ever will, it was always may. And I think actually a casual observer reading this paragraph would get a very different impression from what's written here to the experience of councillors who've been in these discussions for the last year and a bit now, is it? Year and a half, maybe?
Yeah. Well, before being the cabinet member, in, can I just say, was Anthony's answer not helpful to that question?
I don't think Anthony's point was potentially around the drive behind evolved states making the decision. My question here is the wording of this paragraph, given that it is this is a change from may to will. Yeah, and that's a more significant change than a firmer commitment.
Absolutely. Councillor Smith, you wanted to?
Yeah, I was just going to. I do agree. And yes, up until sort of the end of the summer, that was exactly the situation, that it would be an equal partnership moving forward for whatever number of years. I actually think that's kind of covered in paragraph 3.4, unless Simon disagrees with me. The third bullet point there, which is the new clause. That's what this meeting is all about, basically, which is Evolve Estates, after discussions with their partners and their bankers, and there's a number of reasons, I think good commercial reasons, that we can't get into until we get to confidential, means that they want to not be part of this after it's completed. So now there's a clause in the contract, that's what this is all about, that will actually get signed up to say that we will either buy them out after 2 years, or we make up the gap of who they sell it to after 2 years. So that's actually in the contract now. Now, maybe that paragraph at the bottom there is a little bit, but 3.4 and the new clause really covers it off, I think.
Okay, thank you. Sue, Colin, and then Paul. I'm doing my way. Sue, Colin, Paul.
Thanks, Chair. I've slipped into paragraph 3.17 because I'm becoming slightly worried now that, Anthony's used words that sort of add to my uncertainty. He talked about movable numbers, for example. It says in 3.17a that the council will purchase Evolve estate shareholding in full for a pre-agreed price, initially estimated at 3.5 million. I just wonder, nobody's got a crystal ball, but how secure is that figure? And perhaps, our finance officer can answer that. Given all of the fluctuations and uncertainty in the economy in general, and particularly in local authority finances, might we find ourselves at the end of 2 years looking for a figure significantly higher than 3.5 million? And that's one of the significant risks that I'm not yet comfortable about. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anthony, you're able to come on that one. Thank you.
Yes, so in the risk section, there are several risks related to the cost. Now, at the moment, the 3.4 million, let's say, all borrow £1,000 clause is a higher number, so there is £500,000 built in there. That does include some contingency, and it does assume we have to pay stamp duty, land tax. Now, the issue here could be it's 2 years away, so we've got potentially changes in the stamp duty land tax regime that could occur because there's an election which might opt for a new government that changes that. So there are some risks here, but the numbers based on what we know at this point in time. And there is, as I say, there is 883,000 of contingency built in to the council's budget in any case.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'll move on to Colin. Councillor Bird. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. 2 questions of detail, really, again, I'm afraid. 3.4 amended, first one, the council's independent valuation of the freehold for the former Devon's building, 46 Bakers Lane, was incorrect and should be revalued. And I'm hoping that wasn't the value we're using for the ongoing project, because that would be concerning if it was. The second question is about really understanding on, again, 317A. Evolve Estates, the second sentence there, paragraph, rather, Evolve Estates is not seeking payment for the value of the asset the Devon's building is putting into the LLP. And I just like understanding what that means. what the implications are for us. So those are my two questions on that side.
Thank you, Councillor Smith.
I'll take that in the first instance, then maybe Simon Anty I want to chip in as well. So in terms of the valuation, that was in that amended bullet point. That was essentially Evolve Estates coming back in the contract and saying they disagreed with the value that our value had put on the asset. Okay, during negotiations, they're okay and they've agreed to that valuation. So that's a dead clause essentially. In terms of the second, remind me what was the second question? Sorry, Colin, I've got a terrible memory.
Paragraph there. Evolve Estates not seeking payment for the Debenhams building. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so at the start of the partnership, the LLP, we are putting the 5.7 million in, and Evolve Estates are putting in some cash, and they're putting in the asset of the Debenhams building in there. Okay, so I think it's 3.7 million. Plus they've put in the difference in the cash to make up the 5.7. So we both put 50-50 in at the start of the agreement. Even though we're doing the buyout of 3.5 or 3.9 or whatever it is now at the end of the 2 years, okay, they don't want buying out or paying back for the asset of the building, which is a 3.7 million worth of the Debenhams building. That is effectively what that means. In addition to that, and Anthony, again, you shout at me if I've got these numbers wrong, mate, but after the refit and the build out for the cinema's done and all the car parks gone, all that top end's been done, the F&Bs are in there. There's a valuation of 10 million on that asset that will be wholly owned by us at the end of it after we bought out Evolve Estates. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Ray was next.
Yes, just following on from Colin's question there. So is that that's some months, is it? That 3.5, is it? Or is there some do Evolve get that 3.5 the value of the freehold of the building they're putting into the joint? Do they get it in? Do they get that back in effect through the calculation of?
No, they don't get that back at all. They're putting that asset
Right.
the LLP, and they will leave that asset in the LLP. The buyout is not for the value asset.
Right.
The buyout is for the loan they're putting in the commercial.
I understand that. Yeah. Okay. Well, that seems good. And could I just ask about the buyout commitment on the council was triggered after year 2. That is from, I think could you just be clear when that is? That's from when the cinema opens, or when is that triggered?
I think that's a really good question. I'm going to go to Simon for the facts on that. Either it's completion. You're quite right, Paul. What is completion? Is it when the doors are open and we're watching Top Gun 3, or is it when the build's finished? Maybe Simon can help with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So we will.
It's okay, Simon. Yes, please.
So
Thank you.
We will define that. We'll define that very clearly in the contract as well. But for me, completion is when the build out is complete and done, and the units, the retail units, the F&B is ready to start to trade. At that point, the clock starts. 2 years thereafter, the buyout clause would be exercised.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, what was going through my mind, I thought that was the answer. What was going through my mind, and I thought that was the answer, was that it couldn't be from when we sign the contracts. Yeah, no. So yeah, no.
Okay. Well. So it's basic fundamental questions that are very important. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to 317B, I know we've kind of moved on to 317 here. 317B really concerns me, actually, because of the way the LLP is structured, being entirely 50-50. If that were to be a situation where the council, for whatever reason, decided to ask Evolve Estates to go out to the market and get a buyer, and we were in a situation where we're having to top it up, we're going to end up in a situation where we're now 50-50 with a completely unknown organisation who potentially we have no relationship with, and that could cause really serious and significant difficulties. So I think if we are looking at a 17B, it's going to be much more appropriate for, if that situation occurs, we take an extra 1%, so that we have a 51-49 situation, so that we're not going to end up in some type of impasse. That should be doable in terms of the way the contracts work.
And whether it's acceptable is another matter. Simon, yes, please, Chief Exec.
Yeah, so that is why I totally accept Councillor Robertson's concern. That's why the recommendation is that if we are going to commit to this, we commit to buy it out. Not that we wait and see, but we commit now to buying out the full shareholding, so we don't run the risk that Councillor Robson has just discussed.
Dave, can I come back on that?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, whilst I recognise that 2 years is a long time, local government finance is on fire. Is it about £5 billion black hole in local government finance currently? It's the decision to go ahead with this is not a decision that we make tonight. It's a decision that this council makes in 2 years. The decision that we need to make whenever this comes around would be to make sure that we have the financial resources available for us and that we have the appropriate auditory and budgetary systems in place to enable this to happen. If in 2 years' time the situation looks differently, and if there's a different priority, or if there's a different funding settlement, or any of the numerous things that could change our financial position at some point in the next probably 2.5, if not 3 years, and actually potentially depending on how long the build takes, we could even be looking at potentially after the next set of elections. I'm sure we would all not want to be waiting that long, but I do seem to remember being promised a cinema when I was 17. I'm now 37. So, you know, bitter experience has made me bitter. So just in terms of that 17B, I would be very, very, very wary of going ahead without having that provision that if we are in a situation where, for whatever reason, this council is forced to opt to go for 17B, it would be much stronger and much more protecting for the public finance if we can structure it. So in that situation, whatever the additional amount that the council pays is, entitles us to an additional 1% of the LLP so that we do have controlling interest.
The leader wants to come in there.
My chair, thank you. I think, and again, Anthony and Simon or Andy might keep me straight on this and add some further detail, but this council has many millions invested around the country and with other councils who are using our money to shape their own council areas. That's a fundamental part of our budget because the interest payments that we receive on that helps prop us up in terms of a revenue position. My position would be that longer term, perhaps we might look at investing that money within our own district, and particularly where there's a commercial return made available to us. So not only does it continue to support our revenue budget, which appreciating that local government finances are challenged throughout the country, we're in actually an incredibly strong position in Lichfield. So in terms of the question of whether or not we have the capital investment to go into that, I really don't think that's a concern. I think there's a question about whether which pot you might want to put those many millions in. But there is always going to be the option for us to choose to invest that within our own district. Appreciate that hasn't addressed your point about the additional 1%. But I think just at a very high level, we have, again, we've invested in other councils around the country for many years. It perhaps ought not stretch us too far to invest in our own district on this level.
Councillor Smith.
If I could just quickly add that,
right.
Thanks. I think Dave's point was, sorry, Councillor Robertson's point was, I believe, was yes. I don't think we've definitely got the money as a council to do this. Absolutely, we have no problem with that at all. I think your point was, will we have the same will in what's probably going to be 3.5 years' time, whatever it is after they build it, and that might be a different landscape. And it's I'm gonna ask Simon's opinion, but I'm okay to take that advice and go and see what we need to do with that.
You're asking Simon's opinion through the chair.
Through the chair, I'll ask Simon's opinion.
Thank you. Simon, would you like to give your opinion, if that's okay?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So at the moment, what Evolve are asking is a commitment to exercise the buyout clause in 2 years' time. From that perspective, I suppose they don't really care who buys it, if we buy it, or if we seek to go to the market for it. So I think the point raised by Councillor Robertson is a smart one, and certainly as we move towards that deadline, we would need to give great consideration to what we wanted it to look like. Do we want to fund it ourselves, or do we want to enable them to go to the market? In which case, is there an opportunity to purchase more of the ownership, or at least hold more of the ownership? I think all of those options are still open tonight, and nothing that Scrutiny Scrutiny is in a position to push that recommendation onto cabinet and onto full council, I suppose, isn't it? And if I may apologise, just a point of order, it's a 12-month build out. So hopefully before Councillor Robson is 47, we will have the cinema.
I will hold you to that.
Well, we haven't got social services to worry about as a district, Shire District Council. Did you want to come back, Dave, on that? And then-
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Like, I wasn't challenging the decision about where we choose
It's
to in 2 or
scrutinising it.
3 years
That's
time.
what we do. Yeah.
But I think that's a really important point that we need to pick up. And if we don't include it in contracts now, we could find ourselves in hot water. We could find ourselves trying to work with a partner who has completely different views and has completely different priorities to us as a council, wanting to shape place as opposed to solely seek commercial gain. And I think that making sure that we have that protection in at this point, should this go ahead, can only be beneficial to the people of this district. So I think that's the point that I'm trying to make. I'm now confident that people have heard that. So, but yeah, it wasn't necessarily about what decision do we need to make. It was about the protection that we can put in for the people of the district.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Paul Ray then, Sue, and then move on a bit.
Yes, yeah, I hear Councillor Robertson's concerns. Maybe I'm less concerned about that. I guess that's sort of a commercial risk. But the point I was going to make was, is there going to be some assurance that when they go to the open market, if we don't commit, if we don't buy their share, that will be at market value? They're not good. They can't go take it to our market, and get some knockdown price, and then we make up the gap. So that will be included in the documentation, so we are protected.
Yeah. Can someone respond to that? Do you agree or don't you?
I mean, yes is the short answer, but sorry, through you, Chair, if you'd like to pass it to the Chief Executive.
You don't have to. You don't have to have him in if you don't want to. But we'll take the leader's word on that. No, go on. That's how it.
That's what. Sorry, there's a slight delay. I apologise. Are you waiting for me or is Anthony coming?
No, Simon. I didn't even see Anthony put his hand up.
Right. So that's why there's two elements to the clause, isn't it, Chair? So essentially, what Evolve are asking for is protection. If they go to the market in 2 years because the council decides it doesn't want to exercise its right to buy, they don't want to make sure that there's any loss either for them. That's where they're asking us to step in. So we wouldn't be doing the selling of the shares. We would clearly be a partner in the LLP involved in that process. But I can't give you a rock solid guarantee that they will get to the best price, because I can't predict any better than anybody else in the room at the moment what that price would look like in 3 years' time, 2 years' time.
Okay.
I don't think it's very helpful, Chair. I apologise.
That's all right. Thank you.
No, I understand that we can't. We haven't got crystal balls, but we just need to have something in the contract which gives us commitment that when they go to market, they will get the best price. They will test the market rather than just taking the first offer that comes their way. Yeah, I'm sure that will go in there, but that's the point I just want to emphasise.
Thank you, Simon. Yes,
we can certainly include that. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I think Sue was next, and I'm about to move on.
Yeah. Thanks, Chair. We started talking around the LLP and the structure of the LLP, and I know there's a paragraph a bit later on in the report. But Councillor Robertson's point about the 51% versus 49%, I just would like some clarification, please, about how Cabinet, the leadership, see the future of the LLP, because if the LLP has only got one party, it's not a partnership, is it? You know, it is simply the council's ownership of it. So that perhaps is for a little bit later on, Chair. But you know, I just think the future of the LLP is quite sort of interesting in terms of what's going to happen in the future. Thanks.
Thank you. Andy Smith would like to.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So I think that's actually covered under implications for the LLP of a buyout 3.25. I think it talks about what happens to the LLP when there's only one party in it, but obviously it can't be an LLP anymore. So yeah, and I'm more than happy to chuck the 49.51 back into the pot and see what we can do with that, because I think that's a good recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Simon, Sue again. Sorry.
But Chair, I think there needs to be some clarification of that, because unless I'm misreading the report, it seems that the LLP is to continue. It says that the council could transfer the asset and its operation to the council, seek a change to the nature of the company, or connect the LLP to its existing wholly owned company, LW and
3.26,
yeah, and maintain the LLP as it is. So there's some sort of contradiction, it seems to me, that if the LLP has one partner, it's not a partnership, but we're talking about continuing it, and I really don't understand that.
I don't know the Miles can answer for you, Doug, but
thank you, Chair. I think it's just talking about options, isn't it? So saying that there's multiple options available to us. Do we want to take it into the council and dissolve the LLP? Do we want to convert the LLP into a limited company because there's only one party to the LLP dissolves? Or I think what the LLP, where we're talking about connecting it to LWMTS, is almost replacing the other 50% with the LATCO, so that it's still an LLP because there are two parties, albeit those two parties are connected by a parent company, as it were, as in the council. So it still, the LWMTS clearly has its very distinct identity, and that would be the other 50% of it. But I think really this is just talking about options and recognising the fact an NLP would no longer work if we were the sole body.
Is that reassuring?
Yeah, I can see that. It sort of reassures me, except that nowhere in the report does it talk about dissolving the LLP. And I think that would be helpful in terms of Cabinet's consideration of that. As these are a series of options which would include dissolving the LLP.
No, that's accepted. So thank you. And Councillor Miles.
Thank you, Chair. Connected to that discussion about the structure of the LLP, of course, one of the recommendations for us tonight, 2.2 small 2, is to delegate authority to determine and implement the most appropriate ownership model. I just wondered if you could walk me through that process in terms of in terms of council oversight, are we going to build in actually a chance for this committee and for all council to review that at some later point? At the moment, it seems we're delegating quite a big power to decide upon the structure. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that is a very important point. So, we have some reassurance.
Through you, Chair, I'm gonna ask the Chief Exec to put some more meat on the bones on that one.
Okay, thank you. Simon, are you able to assist? Have you heard that?
I apologise, Chair. I dropped out a little bit during part of the question. Could I ask somebody to repeat the question and I'll answer? Sorry.
Perhaps Master repeat it. That's okay.
No problem. I was asking about connected to our discussion about the model, the ownership model that we'll end up with. 2.2 small 2 of the report asks for his recommendation to delegate the decision making on the most appropriate ownership model. So I was just asking, actually, what future oversight will this council have of that decision making?
Thank you, Chair. So I think that's open for discussion, and I think I would certainly welcome members' views on that as well. Anthony will know at the moment we're having an audit undertaken of LWMTS as well in terms of the shareholder responsibility. Currently, we have a shareholder representative. Clearly, if we put more into our companies and more than one company, I think we should look at what is the right, most appropriate shareholder accountability shareholder structure for the organisation. That may be a shareholder board. It may be a shareholder representative as we currently have today. But I think if we go forward with this in the way that we're currently considering, it will become more complex, and we do need to ensure that we maintain appropriate governance arrangements. So in answer to your question, I would welcome anybody's views on what we should be looking at, or what you'd like us to consider looking at, to make sure that you all feel comfortable that you have sufficient control over the companies that you own.
Yeah, we certainly have reports back to overview and scrutiny, can't we? So, and reviewing it then. Dave, you want to do Councillor Robertson?
Chair, may I?
Sorry, yes, Simon, sorry.
Should I take that away and come forward with?
Yeah, please. Well, yes, thank you.
Looking at a lot of local authority companies,
yeah,
a lot of local authority companies up and down the country, and how they are governed and how they are overseen by their parent companies.
That'd be helpful.
Perhaps I could bring that through ONS as a
Please.
discussion piece.
Thank you. That'd be great. Yes, thank you. Councillor Robertson, did you want to?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just in relation to that delegation, I don't think we can make that decision tonight about what's the most appropriate ownership structure going ahead, because actually we don't know who's going to buy it. And again, I don't want to rehash the discussion we've just had, but although that's the aspiration currently, that decision is not currently made. And until that decision is made, then it's not really appropriate to decide what happens after the decision, which hasn't been made yet. And actually, I would be very reluctant at this point, 3 years out from the potential of this being completed, or possibly even more than 3 years, to be making decisions about definitely going ahead with one option or another, and then further decisions based on a decision that doesn't need to be made for 3 years. So I think that delegation may need to be looked at in terms of, whilst we can go ahead if the cabinet chooses to go ahead, and if council chooses to go ahead with this as an aspiration to buy out Evolve and to go with what is 317A, we've still got 317B available. And until council in a couple of years' time decides whether they're going to go through 317A or 317B, it's a bit premature to be having this discussion. So whether that delegation needs looking at on that basis.
Well, I've heard the Chief Executive's offer as well. Councillor Pullen, yeah.
I think I'm going to agree with Dave, but I think I'm probably at the other end of the horseshoe from you, Councillor Robertson. Sorry, that actually I think perhaps the wording might be slightly awkward there. In fact, that I don't think Cabinet can delegate authority to the Leader and Chief Executive. It's slightly the wrong way round. We're not being asked for full council to delegate authority to me and the Chief Executive. So any power that sits within the Cabinet automatically resides with the Leader and the Chief Executive anyway. So I think what we're really asking is, or what the conversation tonight is, any power that will be exercised by myself or whoever the leader is, along with the Chief Executive and the 151 monitoring officer, would still be subject to exactly the same scrutiny as we're going through tonight. So actually, it's almost like no change. We're not. I think if the wording there were to say full council delegate authority to the Leader and Chief Exec, you'd have a perfectly valid point in that it'd be taken away from full council, but this is doing no more than automatically exists in our constitution, I'd suggest. So we're saying no change, and we'd be taking it through precisely the same scrutiny arrangements that we have today.
So that would be helpful then if a cabinet you can make those changes, or
we can clarify that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
for absolute clarity then, in terms of that 2.2 recommendation, is that going to be amended before it comes to cabinet or in the decision-making process? I'm just conscious of the fact that, we've made numerous recommendations around this overview and scrutiny committee table to cabinet, which have not always been taken forward or considered properly. And thinking about the LWMTS, that was one particular issue and governance issues there. So can I have some clarity around that? Is it going to be amended? Is it going to be changed? And in what way is it? How do we take our views forward?
Well, they're being recorded anyway, but I mean, yes, if you want a commitment now from the leader, is he able to do that? You able to do that?
Yes. And we'll make sure that
Okay.
wording is clarified, if not amended, for the cabinet recommendation.
Thank you. And Councillor Paul Ray.
Yeah, just following on this, as I see it, 2.22, this is Councillor Robertson's point, we cannot ascertain that ownership model at this stage. Surely that then that becomes part of 317. So when full council considers, do we exercise the buyout option or do we not? Also, you come to full council with, if we do exercise the buyout option, how this asset's going to be owned.
Yes,
Chair, I think the paper that is coming through tonight and is going to cabinet on Tuesday is asking us to determine whether or not we will exercise that buyout option. I don't think it's saying determine in 2 years' time whether or not you wish to exercise it. It's asking for the commitment now to exercise that commitment. So where we're talking about delegating or determining the most appropriate ownership model, that is assuming that the option to exercise that buyout right has been exercised. So the decision now, and I say now, I mean tonight, Tuesday, and a full council, is: do we exercise that right? Do we commit now to exercise that right in 2 years' time. What we're not committing to at this point in time is what does that ownership model look like? That will be determined by the facts, no doubt, in 18 months, 2 years' time, or whenever that is. So hopefully that provides a bit more clarity around that.
Yeah, that's what it used to say. Yeah, but I think to create that clarity, reference to the ownership model needs to be in 317.
Okay. And Dave, and then I'd like to move on. I really would like to move on.
I apologise for flogging the
all right.
course, Chair. As I'm reading 317, that's saying that the clauses in the LLP, the clauses in the contract that we signed to form the LLP to get everything going, will commit us to either buy Evolve out or make up the difference between somebody else buying Evolve out and buying Evolve out. That I don't think is us tonight making a commitment to buying Evolve out. I think it's us making a commitment to do either A or B. And I would be exceptionally reluctant at this point to say we are committing ourselves to A 3 years ahead of time.
Well,
I just like to confirm that's exactly right, Dave. There are two options on there. Those are the only two options on there, but those are the two options there. We are definitely not committing tonight, Cabinet, or the next council meeting to do that. Those are just we're committing to commit to one of the two options.
Thank you. I'm moving on, if I may. Then this is the approved medium-term financial strategy. Any questions on that bottom of page 13, the start of this? On page 14. Yes, Dave.
Unsurprisingly, I have various questions about the numbers. Would you like me to just rattle through them, Chair, or one at a time?
No, that's all right. Well, I'm sure Anthony can follow
them. So the first one, potential external funding. At that second bullet point about the further tranche of 8 million, I note the use of the word considering, which is a damn sight less certain when we're talking about £1 million hole in the side of our budget.
So you've got to tell me where you are, actually, on what page are you on?
So potential options to fund the projected cost of the
buyout. What page are you on?
14.
Right. Thank you.
It's the second bullet point of 3.
Yeah. Thank you.
So it looks like we're going to get £1.5 million back from the LEP when we get kicked out of it because the government said we can't be in it anymore, and they're considering whether we're going to get another 925,000. Considering is a very vague term for £1 million of a hole in this process. So can you please provide me some clarity? Can you please try and put my mind at rest? I'm hoping that somebody can, because considering is is not the certainty that I'm looking for when we're talking about £1 million contribution to what is a £3.5 million project.
Did you want to say really, really considering, or
can I pass this? I'm not trying to book
that's
past here, but Simon's the one that's had the discussions with the GBS, so he's better placed to answer.
Did you hear that, Simon? That question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anthony, Chair, through you as well. So the 1.5 million is being set aside for each of the districts and boroughs in the GBS LEP. There is a further £20 million available. The GBS LEP is currently considering how best to disperse that £20 million. The two options they were considering are a bidding process. So every district, borough, anybody else, any other council has the right to bid for up to and all of that £20 million, or they could simply give each of the interested parties or the involved parties a fair share. Every chief executive I've spoken to across the GBS LEP has responded in exactly the same way and said, just give us our fair share. So I'm hoping, but we will know very soon, that is what will happen.
So we're going for a socialist approach, Dave. Is that amenable to you?
Well, there's a question about that. That does answer that, Chair. I've got a few more. Do you want to go to the people?
Please, no, Dave, carry on.
Thank you very much, Chair. If we move on, I'm now slipping into the table, which is ever so slightly on page 14, but is pretty much on page 15. The zip wire in Burnwood, £30,000 that we're going to move over to that. I assume that means that project isn't going ahead, or is that a saving from that project?
So what I've done in the table is I've done 3 scenarios around funding. So there's an optimistic, and I mean optimistic there, from reducing the borrowing need to the absolute minimum. there's a central scenario, which is the one that we're looking to base the budget on, that goes to council, and a pessimistic, which basically reduces the funding to the absolute minimum and means the borrowing needs higher. In the optimistic scenario, we've looked at options available, so not whether they're progressing fully or whether they're palatable, but what if we wanted to reduce that borrowing need down to the absolute minimum, which elements of the capital programme could be diverted into funding this project. So we've obviously got the loan to the company, the coach park, and then there are 3 projects where there is money committed, but there has been minimal progress on implementation, and therefore if we're seeking to reduce the borrowing need down to the absolute minimum, it's probably pertinent to review those and consider, are they still a priority for the council, or should they be directed into a project of this nature? But I would emphasise that in the central scenario, that decision is not being put forward to members to take. It's just what options are available.
Thank you.
So thank you for that, Anthony. Just in terms of that zip wire in Burntwood, it does look like there's one there. I thought that formed part of that Franken Monster Sill bid last year. So it didn't. Okay, so that's not where the funding's coming from. That answers that question. Thank you. I think I've got one more, Chair, unless you want to bring in.
No, that's all right then. So I'll bring it after you.
At the bottom of page 15, there is, in fact, I've got two queries on that table at the bottom there. The first one is the asset manager annual inflation assumption of 2%. I won't use the wording that I've got in my notes because it would not be appropriate for a public meeting. But I think it's fair to say that I am not confident in that remaining at 2%. And then the other one, the kind of more serious one, I think, because it's going to have a more material impact. Running void, I presume that's due to vacancies within the. How many F&B units are we scheduled to have? Because I don't think we're planning on having 20 there. And if we don't have 20, I don't know how you can have 5%.
Anthony, you're helping with that. Yes, thank you. Thank you.
So the inflation, the number I've used is the Bank of England target. And I accept in the current environment that is probably a very optimistic number. However, what I would say is that several mitigations to that. So that number, that inflation, is only currently being applied to the asset manager element of the costs. So in the central scenario, that's £75,000. So it's not a huge number if you went with double, 3 times that number. The other mitigations that are built in is we're not applying inflationary increases to the income side on rental, which is a much bigger number at 600,000. So if inflation moved as you projected, it would impact on the income side and the expenditure side. The income side's bigger, so it should be more beneficial. The other point I would make is that even if inflation did get out of control and it meant costs were going up, that is part of the reason why we're recommending sinking fund and void allowances being built into the financial modelling, so that there is some budget contingency for things like higher inflation, vacancies, capital investment need, etc., etc. I'll be honest, with the running void, it's not just it doesn't just cover the vacancies. It covers other potential risks, and I'm just looking now when I put my note down in this. So it would include things like non-payment or rent reductions, or things like accounting charges for credit risk, or in some of the models we might have to pay corporation tax, etc. So it provides an element of contingency for some of the uncertainties that might be there.
Okay. Go back if you wish, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if that running void is going to cost all of that and the potential for any vacancies in the F&B, I think 5% is quite optimistic. I take your point on the inflation figure. That's entirely appropriate, and nobody wants to see higher inflation. But I agree, it would be beneficial looking at the size of the two values. But significant concerns about that 5% value, I think.
Okay, Sue was next.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to comment briefly on this £30,000 that's anticipated in that first column to move from a zip wire in Burntwood. I've been reassured tonight by the Cabinet member saying twice that Lichfield District Council has many millions of pounds invested. I asked not very long ago for £1 million investment in Burntwood, and that was rejected at the time by the former leader of the council. But I also note on the bottom of page 12 that if we do acquire this property as 100%, or we sell on, that the investment will be for other activities in the district. Now, I don't think that's going to be necessary if we've got many millions of pounds that could be used for the benefit of the residents, not just of Burntwood, but rural areas. We're talking about £9.78 million into the city, and the city is very different. I'm not arguing against city folks. We need to make sure the city is an attractive place to visit, but I will keep on reiterating the fact that we need a fairer and more equitable funding scheme across the whole district, not just in one part of it.
I'm sure that was heard. I'm not going to ask for a response because this is about. You can respond if you want. I don't want to stop you responding.
I'd like to respond.
You're so
okay,
desperate
Chair.
to
Yeah,
respond, leader.
I think it's about striking a balance, isn't it? When we talk about investing, I suppose we use that term in two different ways. One, when I talk about many millions invested with councils around the country, that is nothing but a purely commercial investment to ensure that our revenue budget is able to be sustainable and deliver the services that our residents expect. We also talk about investing in our communities, quite rightly. That's not a commercial investment. It is just as important investment, but it's not a commercial investment. So my comments this evening were merely appertaining to pure commercial investments, and I'm not entirely sure that that is exactly what perhaps Councillor Woodward's point this evening are, although it might form part of it. Thank you, Chair.
Maybe.
There are certainly returns on investment in communities.
Yeah. No. We'll have another report on that. Councillor Whaley-Howen, I would like to move on, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to comment on the £30,000 for the zip wire in Burntwood. I know, I apologise. Unless I'm hallucinating, my son playing on a zip wire in Burntwood. It's already built. Are we having a second zip wire in Burntwood that's costing £30,000?
You can answer it if you want. It's not relevant to the report, really.
I think the only thing I'd reiterate is that isn't part of the decision that will go to council. It is part. It was one of the options being considered.
Yeah, well, you've learnt now, haven't you? You've learnt now. Councillor Ball, then, please. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd raised with the Section 151 officer earlier about the 2%. I'm reassured by what the answer is given to Councillor Robertson. But I want to come back on the running void figures. Because I agree completely with Councillor Robertson. I think that I would have 5% as optimistic, 10% as central, and maybe 20% as pessimistic. Because we know high streets are struggling at the moment. I know we're talking here more about food and beverage outlets, but some of those struggle too. And those are new outlets in a new setting. So I think that needs to be revisited perhaps, and a bit more attention paid to it.
I'll just come in on the high street struggling. Actually, I think Councillor Boy, you're quite right to raise the risks. Completely agreed on that. I think for me though, if you look at the Bakers Lane shopping centre where this is going, and also around Lichfield City, I think there's no vacant stores down the Bakers Lane. I thought there's maybe, but very close to none. It's certainly in a much better position in a lot of areas. I think so. We should be proud of that, and I think that's good. So I think that's not a massive risk in terms of zip wire. I want to go and have a look tomorrow and make sure and have a go on it.
Look on Google Earth.
I think there are several vacant units in the Spire Centre at the moment.
Sorry.
I'll just on the specifics. So the vacant void in the sinking fund, they are separate. They're interchangeable. They're effectively risk management tools and just so that to give you some assurance. So setting a sinking is quite a complex calculation, because you need to understand the condition of the building, what its investment needs are, etc. So we had a look around, and there is a prominent local authority, which I'm not going to name, with a significant property portfolio. They set aside 12% of annual rental income into a sinking fund. The three scenarios that we've modelled at this point in time set aside 28%, 42% and 50%. So that is much higher than a comparator who has a large portfolio. The reason for that is the level of uncertainty here. So not only with the forecast that we're doing, but as you say, in the market and things like that. So I'm hoping that would give you some assurance that we are setting aside robust amounts to cover the risks of vacancy, investment, etc., etc.
Okay, thank you. I think that was it. So I'll have to go on to page 16, if I may. And then I'll go quickly on to 17 in case you've got some questions on. Oh, yes. no, they always only about 16. You know,
Sorry, Chair.
No, Colin.
On page 17, I mean, you did say we would have full opportunity to ask all the questions we wanted, and I'm happy to extend standing orders beyond 9 o'clock. I hope we don't have to do that, but I think we've got to take this seriously and treat it with respect. I'm pleased.
We're talking about zip wise. Where are we then?
Well, yeah, that was perhaps irrelevant, but moving on to the risks, I'm pleased to see the risks set out as yellow, red, and yellow, or green, or whatever. That was something I asked for 5 years ago, and finally it's coming around because that shows us the mitigation that's been put in place to try and reduce them. But I am concerned that two new risks, E and F, don't change between the original score and the current score. So the mitigation we're putting in place is not reducing those risks. So I just wonder why that is, because certainly in my experience of doing risk analysis, one would always expect the column at the end to be an improvement on the column at the beginning because of mitigation measures we put in place.
I think that's actually a really good point, Colin. And actually, I've also, while on the risk section, I've been arguing for a long time to move to the to look at the likelihood and the impact of the risk as opposed to just the overall one, because you need the two. But I'm going to push through to Simon, if that's okay, Chair.
Yes.
To answer the why our residual risk is hasn't moved at one.
That okay, Simon? Can you?
Yes, I'm just looking at the risks now as well. Can I
get back to you?
Well, I suppose looking at it on its own, the cost of the buyout exceeds the budget. I'm just trying to run through my head how else we might mitigate that risk at this stage. Is it fair to say I need to take it away and work on this?
Yeah,
sure. Thank you. So, although Anthony might have an answer, don't I?
Well, so on E and F, it's probably the cautious, prudent side of me that's come out there. So on E, the service charges, we haven't got full visibility on the service charge arrangements. So whilst we can build a budget, build headroom, I suppose until we've got full visibility, we don't know how effective that risk mitigation is. So that's why it stayed the same. Whilst we've built in things like sinking funds and risk-based budgets, until we see visibility, we can't be certain on that. So that would be my answer on that one. On F, I mean, we've discussed this previously. There is an element of risk around the cost increase here. And yes, we built client contingency in of 18% based on independent assessment. There is always a risk that may not be enough.
Okay, thank you. Leader wants to come in here, sorry.
Just a final point, Chair, I suppose it's a generic point. So, sometimes risks, you can't mitigate them. You can do everything you can, but they're unmitigatable, in which case you can transfer the risk, and we look at whether that's through insuring it or whether it's actually through tightening up the contract to actually build in a different mechanism within our contractual obligations to ensure, for instance, that the cost doesn't exceed the budget, so we can look at it in different ways.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Colin. Page 18, anything on that section? And then you've got the approved capital program budget and so on appendix. The public section, Appendix A. Colin, please, thank you.
So numbers, I'm afraid, are not my strong point, but I do recognise 3 quite significant changes between the optimistic scenario, the central scenario, and the pessimistic scenario, and I don't quite understand why that arrives. I'm looking at the bottom right-hand figure in each of those columns.
Yeah.
The optimistic suggests just over 400,000. The central 250,000 thereabouts, but the pessimistic 9,500, and that strikes me as a dramatic jump between the central and the pessimistic, and I can't quite understand how that works.
They are dramatic, I have to say. Yeah. Anthony, thank you.
Yes, so there is so the rental income stays consistent across all 3 scenarios. So in the next 4 lines down, use different assumptions basically. So the running void on the optimistic, we're saying there are no voids, there's no vacancies, and then we apply a 5% or a 10% in the 2 scenarios. So that reduces the income. The asset manager, again, we start off at 50,000 cost in the optimistic. We had 25,000 to 75 and 100. So the cost increases. The asset owner sinking fund, again, we look at the proportion of the asset that's covered by a sinking fund. So it's higher as we get more pessimistic in our assumptions. And then the capital financing costs are based on the level of the borrowing need. So effectively what we're saying here is that we use the same rental income across all 3 scenarios, but we use increasingly cautious assumptions, and therefore the amount of income generated or net income generated becomes lower the more cautious those assumptions become.
Yeah, I understand that, and the biggest contributor to that is the capital financing costs. And I can see that, but I still don't quite understand. Maybe it's something to take offline. But you know, those 3 capital financing costs in each of the 3 scenarios are dramatically increasing exponentially as we go down the screen. And you know, I'd like a bit more understanding of about why that is the case.
Okay, so whether I can answer it now, but in the 3 scenarios, it depends upon the level of the borrowing need or projected borrowing need. So the optimistic would be a borrowing need of £56,000. So you're talking about very, very low capital financing costs if you work that out over a 25-year period. We're talking about 495,000 in the central scenario. So that means it's higher cost over a 25-year period. When we get to the pessimistic, we're talking about a borrowing need of £2.7 million. So that is significantly higher than the other 2 scenarios. So again, over a 25-year period, the repayment each year is much higher.
I understand that now. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Dave.
Thank you, Chair. Unsurprisingly, me and Councillor Ball are kicking at the same hornet's nest. In terms of the pessimistic scenario here, I think both myself and Councillor Ball have already made the point that 10% may not be where we want to land, although obviously the sinking fund will come into that as well. But at £9,570 worth of income, the payback time in there is significant, I think is the polite way of putting it. In that scenario, there would be almost no way of replenishing those reserves that we could look at redeploying them over in the areas of the district where there's been historic underinvestment and seeking to redress that geographical investment imbalance. And I think as you've already alluded to, the major driver of that would be the change in the capital financing costs. And can I reiterate my point about considering, albeit the Chief Executive's assurance that every single other CEX he's spoken to around GBS LEP, considering is not a great verb. And actually the loss of that £955,000, whatever it is, means the capital financing costs here become effectively ruinous to our ability to replenish those reserves and to then be able to redeploy them and redress those historic investment discrepancies. So I think getting some assurance and some clarity on that, and hopefully upgrading that, considering to a different verb, would be exceptionally beneficial, particularly as this isn't going to be going to cabinet in 5 days' time. So there is some time there if we're able to twist some thumbs of some colleagues in GPS LEP and hopefully get a little more clarity on that.
Okay, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll take the last point first. Yeah, in terms of GBS LEP, I know Simon will be more than happy to go back and put some more meat on the bones on that and reword that correctly where we can. I just wanted to raise a point in terms of the payback, because I also asked a question on the payback. Now, the central scenario is the one obviously we're all hoping and willing, and that is the average one, and that's the one that's the central scenario. Probably not the optimistic, pessimistic. It is what it is. But okay, so first point is, I think, Anthony, shout at me if I'm wrong. All of those numbers mean this is budget neutral in terms of our MTFS, so it doesn't affect our revenue budget at all. It's encapsulated all within the cinema project. And secondly, we just have to, as a mitigant to the payback on the money invested, with the payback from the rental, we've also got the asset value of the building that will be 100% ours. Now, I know. So you raised it. There's no guarantee what it's worth, but they're putting it in. It's currently worth 3.7, which is from our independent valuer. So that's a pretty definite 3.7 million. There's also, at the end of it, when the fit out's been done, and we've got an operating cinema that its numbers up to 10 million. So we will have that asset that we wholly own as a council at that point in time. It's just worth raising that point.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now we've got the recommendations, and I'll comment to that later. But now I'm going to go into confidential with William's help there, on the basis there are questions, no doubt, that members have in the confidential section. There's not a lot in the confidential section, but there is important commercially sensitive information there, and that's why we need to go into confidential. So, I resolve that as publicity would be prejudicial to the public interest by reason of the confidential nature of the business to be transacted, the public and press be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business, which would involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972. Thank you.